Shake Radio, I'm Sebastian Kunz. In the 1960s, David Gerrold made his first sale as a screenwriter thanks to an episode that became famous. It was a Star Trek episode entitled The Trouble with Tribbles.
Is it?
What is it? Why, lovely lady, it's a tribble.
In the 1980s, Gerrold was working for Star Trek The Next Generation and first drafted a script for that show that featured the first ever gay characters in Star Trek, as well as the theme of a blood-borne illness that was analogous to AIDS. Politics and conservative minds back then at Paramount Pictures led to the script being buried. But now, in the blossoming online video culture, Star Trek fans are taking the helm and producing their own fan fiction. One such group thought to call Gerrold and ask for permission to produce, about 20 years later, the script entitled Blood and Fire.
That script has been through a lot of changes. It was written for Star Trek Next Generation. And then I translated the essential story and dilemma to Star Wolf. And now Carlos Pedraza has taken the Next Generation script and translated it to the original series. And so what he's done is essentially, Picard becomes Kirk and so on, and Data's lines are given to Spock, and then, of course, you have to adjust because the characters are different. But I would say that essentially it's the same story. The same problem, the same dilemma is that there is this disease so horrible that you can't rescue anyone from a ship that's been infected with it. You have to destroy the ship, and our mission team is trapped over there because they go over there not knowing it's infected.
I see, and I believe I read that was supposed to be sort of an analog for the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s. Is that right?
Yes, it was. It was the fear of AIDS, and I'll give you some background. In 1986, just after Star Trek Next Generation was announced, Gene Roddenberry and I were both guests of honor at a convention in Boston. 3,000 people were there. And one of the fans in the audience asked the Next Gen, which we had just been announced, we had nothing developed, and he asked, are you going to have gay characters on board? And Gene said, yes, it's time. And then when we got back to Los Angeles, we had a memo from Rick Berman listing at least 50 different issues we should address, and one of them was AIDS. And about that time, we found out Mike Miner, who had been art director on the Star Trek pictures, had AIDS and wouldn't be able to work for us. And later on, Bill Tice had to retire because he had AIDS. And this was before Rock Hudson had come out. And so there was this incredible stigma about AIDS. It was just an incredible stigma. And people were so afraid that even blood donorship had dropped off because people were afraid of AIDS. And so all of these things came together, and when Gene repeated his pledge in the office, in an office meeting, I said, I can put all of it together into one story about the fear of AIDS, and people have to donate blood to save our crew members because the cure involves this. And so that way, at the end of the episode, we can put up a card encouraging blood donorship. And which is what I wanted to do, because I was always I had just gotten my gold pin for donating whatever it is, a whole gallon of blood, and I really wanted to do something about ending the fear of AIDS and getting people to start donating blood again. And I tossed in a couple of gay crew members who, unless you read the script very carefully, you don't know they're gay.
Sure.
They never use the word gay. It's just the way if you were like 6 years old, you'd see them as just good friends. But if you were old enough to catch subtext, you would get it. These guys are in a relationship. And I felt that was right in keeping with the original mission of Star Trek, which was to challenge the status quo.
Absolutely.
And Gene always said, what's that story that sticks in your craw that you can't tell anywhere else? You bring it to Star Trek. And so I was so inspired when Gene said that I really wanted to push this episode then.
So, and how did you get in touch with the fans that want to do the script now?
I didn't get in touch with them at all. They came to me.
Oh, what was that initial conversation like?
Well, they had already done an episode with Walter that Dorothy Fontana wrote, and they just had done one or planned one with George Takei, which they just finished shooting, and I saw the rough cut, and it's a brilliant episode, brilliant script, brilliant performance by George. And they contacted me from Dorothy. Dorothy said, you really should, these people are going to call you, you really should talk to them. So James Cawley, who is the executive producer and the guy running the whole thing, says, we want to do Blood and Fire. Can we do Blood and Fire? And I thought, sure, why not? I'd love to see somebody take a crack at it and see what it looks like on film.
Do you have a lot of involvement with it, or do they just sort of call you and ask for the script rights?
They said, do you want to do the rewrite? And I said, hell no. I'm done with it. And so I said, you got a guy who knows his way around the script. Have him translate it. I'll look it over when he's done. And his name is Carlos Pedraz, and he did an excellent job. He did just a very professional job of translating it over. And they sent it to me, and I said, yeah, it's good. Go ahead and shoot it. And they said, well, do you have anything to say about it? I said, well, there's a line here or there that I would really think you could fix. It could be a little stronger. And the next thing I know, I had promised to do, to go through the script and fix whatever needed fixing. Well, that has since turned it. Well, you just want it to be the best it can be. So it's turned into, I don't want to say a major rewrite. I've expanded and added a couple things, and I've cut some stuff. And so I would say my involvement to this point has been fairly heavy.
Interesting. Do you find is it easier dealing with the folks doing this sort of work compared to the actual Hollywood studios?
Yes. These guys now they're professional in their attitude, but there's an enormous amount of respect for the storytelling. I am for the people who, there's an enormous respect for Trek benefits. They don't, at the studio sometimes it's kind of like, we hire you, we fire you, we're done with you, without ever recognizing that the fans have an enormous sense of connection to the people who've made big contributions, written their favorite episodes, or starred in their favorite episodes. So over at New Voyages, I finally had to say to him, look, I don't live on a pedestal. Don't shove one under my feet. I want you to treat me like a member of the team. If you want changes or if you need things from me, just pick up the phone and say, hey, David, can you do this? Like you would any other member of the team, and we'll get along fine. And I had to say that like 3 times, and then they got it. And then we got together for dinner about a month ago when several of us were in town. I guess 20 of us got together, and we all did the bonding thing. And I really felt very good about these guys and what they're up to, the level of professionalism, and they're ambitious. They really want to go places, they want to push Star Trek as far as it can go.
And I guess a lot of that just must come from the genuine love they have for the material. They've been growing up with it ever since they were kids, probably.
Absolutely. This is the purest love of Star Trek. When we did Star Trek originally in the 60s, well, most of us were there because we loved it. And people just there because it was a job didn't last very long. But those of us who just loved what we were doing were having the time of our lives. And that's what these guys are doing. They're having the time of their lives reinventing Star Trek and being as accurate to the original as they can get.
That's amazing to me. It makes me think the whole culture may be about to change. I'll leave you with one last question. You've been on screen a couple of times, Trials and Tribulations, the first Star Trek movie. Which is more fun, being a writer or being on screen?
Being a writer. You have more control. Being on screen is boring. You stand around in a costume that is uncomfortable and makes you look silly. You stand around in the costume for about 5 hours while they're lighting the set and blocking the shot, and then there's about, I'd say, 3 minutes of actual work, and then you're done. And it's boring, but when you're sitting at the keyboard, adventures are happening as fast as you can think them and type them.
Do you ever get intimidated or scared by staring at that blank page like I've heard a lot of writers get?
Yeah, a lot of people say the blank page is the enemy. I would say there are times when I really hate staring at the blank screen. So I start typing to fill it up. And even if it's the wrong thing, it's something to start editing. And in the editing or the fixing, I start finding what I really want to get to.
Thank God for the backspace key, huh?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank God for the backspace key.